It's 4 o'clock on Thursday, and if you're looking for some action, you've come to the right place. This is Taxi's Quarantini Happy Hour. Woo-hoo. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Your host has laryngitis today. Woohoo! I'm not sick in any other form or fashion, gotta say. Hey, Dan Weber, how are you? Thanks for always showing up early. Where are the rest of you slackers? Come on, get your butts in that chat room. Anyway, I've got laryngitis. I've got no fever. I've got no sore throat. I've got nothing, but I've got this movie announcer voice in a world. So there you go. Might be a short show today. It will go away, says George Georges. I hope so. Yeah, I take my temperature like 3 times a day. I'm going to buy myself a hazmat suit. Because you know what? If I'm wearing it, even if I run into people I know at the grocery store, they won't know it's me. You know what? Somebody said that to me yesterday. Late last night, a family friend of ours was on the phone with me, and she said, you know what? Allergies are really bad right now. I said, yeah, but it's been raining pretty much all week. She said, doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got like post-nasal drip, and I mean just the ever slightest amount of inflammation in the throat, but I've got the big, deep voice. I'm James Earl Jones. Hey, Martin Gravel, Justin Mather, how are you, buddy? Brenda Thompson, Dean Turner, Akira Canyon, Christopher Jones. Hello, Christopher. Edmund Red. So do you guys all wait once you get the notification? That's when you show up? It's a little disconcerting, I got to say, when I start the show and the only person in the chat room is Dan Weber. Peter Rayhill, how are you? Dave Bennett, Space Muse, L. Harrison. Oh, Justin says he didn't even get the notification. Click the little bell when you're on the archive page after the show's over. I don't know if it shows up on the page you're watching on now. It might. Yeah, up in the upper right-hand corner, far right-hand corner, there's a little bell. Just click on that. You'll get a notification. Martin Gravel says he got the notification. Glenn Letts says he needed to look for a link. Hello, John Pearson. Boy, you've been on fire lately. Lou Lewis. Wow. Paul House, good morning. Oh, my gosh. Thank you for showing up, Paul. Okay, so I thought I had more questions left over. Sorry, for those of you who arrived a little late. I'm not sick in any way, shape, or form, but I've got laryngitis. I did go for a little walk in the cold, drizzly night air the other night. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but I've got no fever. I've got no sneezes. I've got no coughing. All I've got is a little post-nasal drip, and I stole James Earl Jones's voice. I can tell you a funny James Earl Jones story that took place in a recording studio, because I know how you guys love those studio stories. So around 1985-86, I was working in New York at the aforementioned Howard Schwartz recording, which later became HSR, and it was the preeminent kind of audio for media facility. I think when I got there, there were, 4 or 5 rooms. When I left, there were like 9, 10, or 11 rooms. Some of those rooms went for as much as $450 an hour, and ad agencies happily paid that money to get in there. Anyway, we worked with big celebrities doing voiceovers literally every day of the week. And not infrequently, we would see James Earl Jones in there. One day he showed up. I can't remember what he was doing a session for. But I was the studio manager, but I would engineer when people were either out sick or on vacation, or clients that requested me because they'd worked with me before, whatever the circumstance was. Anyway, I'm on a James Earl Jones session. And I knew him a little bit just from seeing him around the studio in the lobby. How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And turns out that he's dyslexic, and he's fairly public about this. I'm not telling tales out of school, I don't believe. Anyway, do you know that whenever he delivers lines, whether it's in a film or a commercial or anything, even Arby's, we got the meat. We got the meat. He memorizes it. Just interesting factoid that, you know, Darth Vader memorizes his lines. Kind of cool. Let's see. I wonder if Dean Crapane's going to show up today, because one of the questions I'm going to answer is his. Can somebody call Dean, tell him to show up? He was in Field of Dreams. He was great in that. I just saw that. That was just on, I think, last Saturday or Sunday in the middle of the afternoon. Kombucha with cayenne. That's what I should have put in my tea, was some cayenne. Wow. I've gargled with warm salt water. Don't walk in the rain these days. Yeah, I'm probably not brilliant. It wasn't raining when I started, but I did have on a rain slicker thing, and I put the hood up, and I had a hoodie on underneath it, so I was pretty bundled up. Anyway, excuse me. I don't have a stuffy nose. I just have this, like, gunk. Peppermint oil for stuffy nose. I have to think about that. Golden seal. Is that like a harp seal or baby harp seal? So, Tom Hoy asked the other day if we would be getting more COVID-related listings, and the answer is yes. They keep coming in. Initially, we actually sent out an email to some of our favorite libraries thinking we'd give them a little edge and let them get first dibs on some of the stuff. But, man, oh man, we sent that out. We got like a 50% response, I think, on that email. Just a small group of libraries. And all of a sudden, they just started pouring in. And I would say I've probably seen 4 of them in the last week at least. And some of them aren't really obvious, you know. It may be they're looking for indie pop songs about redemption or something, you know. But look at the keywords, the lyric keywords, and you look at them in total and go, oh, I see what that could be used for. A couple of them, because I do the final edits on all the listings. I check them just to make sure they make sense. They've already gone through like 2 or 3 people before they get to me, but I give them one last go over before they go out. Actually, I think that Bria and Ariana give them one more after I get my hands on them. And so sometimes when I see stuff that is obvious to me that it's going to be for the upcoming pandemic-related movies and TV shows, I'll mention that. Mucinex. I've got Mucinex. But all I've got is the, like, laryngitis thing. Glenn Lett says, is doctor prescribed Flonase? You know what? We've got Flonase in the... That's the one in the spray bottle, right? My wife uses that, and I think I saw one in her nightstand drawer. There you go. Hello, Carl McHugh. Ann House says she's buffering, thinks it's on her end. Yeah, I'm not getting anybody else complaining about buffering. And now that I've got, and I am plugged into the wire, now that I've got that, you know, I'm like 10 to 12 megs up, so plenty of stuff here. Single malt scotch. Man, I've said this before. If I could drink, I'd be an alcoholic. But I get a headache. Half a drink of anything, and I've got a headache before I'm even finished with the whole drink. Lemon ginger tea with honey. Right there. It's exactly what I'm drinking. Okay. Anyway, all right, so Tom Hoy asked, will there be more COVID listings? The answer is yes. We've had them. There's more coming in. And I guarantee you when this whole thing is over and people go into full tilt production and a lot of stuff gets green lighted. Is it green lighted or green lit? Well, whatever. When they get to do it, that's when you're going to hear, you're going to see a lot more listings for that kind of stuff. Again, if you are in the business of creating drones, go to Vice channel. I think it's called Viceland. You can also check out the Vice stuff that's on HBO. Now Vice is on Showtime, I think. And you can look at the Vice stuff that's on YouTube. And look for any of the stuff, any of the documentaries or reports that take place in war-torn countries. Or maybe stuff that they have about some weird satanic cult. That stuff always has that kind of ominous, something's going to hit the fan. Some of it sounds kind of scientific. It would all work pretty well in as background stuff in COVID-related shows when they come out. So learn how to make those cues. George has asked a question in the chat room. I believe it was on yesterday's show or the day before. What day is today? Today's Thursday, so it's probably Tuesday's show, actually. George asked this question. Someone who's not social at all, will the road rally, for someone who's not social at all, will the road rally be useless for them? The answer is no. It will be incredibly useful for you. We've heard this now. We've done 23 road rallies over the years. And I would say that every single person who's ever asked this question, many of them have either emailed me, called the office, asked the question, and I have literally challenged them and said, you know what, if you fly out for the convention and you don't find it the most comfortable atmosphere you've ever been in to make new friends and meet people, and they're like, oh my God, that's the last thing I want to do. And then they get there, and before they're even up to the front of the line at registration on the first night, they've made friends. They inevitably come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, wow, I made so many friends. You were absolutely right. But I've offered people, let me know. I will refund I will buy your plane ticket for you. I've never had to make good on that offer, thankfully. Also, we get the question a lot, will my spouse be comfortable, whether it's a husband or a wife? Sorry, Barry. Barry Dvorak from Master Writer's been calling me all day. I feel terrible. Anyway, Ariana, can you please have Bria email Barry and tell him I'm on the air right now? Thanks. Anyway, spouses coming to the road rally, even kind of especially if they're not musical. If your husband or wife wonders why you're involved in this folly of making music and trying to build a career and make money with your music, it's a pipe dream, it'll never happen for you. I would say about 99% of the spouses that come to the road rally with their significant others who make the music go home being so supportive of the music-making spouse, because they end up going to the panels, they go to some of the classes, they meet all the awesome people, and they go, wow, this is real. People are actually making money and getting stuff in television and movies. They always thought that it was a pipe dream that was unachievable, and they find out the road rally that it was real, and they meet the people who are actually doing it, and they flip out. So then they really get behind it. So when it's time to get that new synthesizer, sure, honey, go ahead. A lot of that going on. Matt Bantle, yeah, we moved the happy hour, the Quarantini Happy Hour to 4 o'clock because too many people in the U.S. were working from home and couldn't make it. I'm scanning. Okay, so that's the answer to that. And as I said the other day, nobody can be certain, but all indications are now that things should be significantly calmed down and travel will once again be safe. By then, I'm going to have to make a final determination 3 or 4 months out. The road rally's the first weekend in November, so November, October, September, August. Let's say by July, midsummer, I'm going to have to decide if we're doing it or we're not. And we'll see where we're at with the virus by then. Hopefully things will be fine. Did I tell you that? Oh, I did mention that. I know somebody who flew from New Orleans to L.A. the other day, I think on Tuesday. There were 8 people on a 737, and the tickets were $39 round trip from New Orleans to L.A. Unbelievable. I don't know, even at that price with only 8 people on the plane, if I still would have gotten on that plane. I'd bring my own can of Lysol with me, a bed sheet to throw, spray the seat, throw a sheet over the seat, have on a mask, have on gloves, have wipies for every surface you could touch. And I would still sit there like this the whole time. Deb and Keith McCall, did I already answer this? Can we play drum pads instead of using loops? If I didn't answer it, I think Ronan and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but yes, absolutely you can play drum pads. Just use the pads to trigger really good sounds from Easy Drummer, Superior Drummer, Slate drums, and any of the top brands. I think all sound infinitely better than drums did even 5 years ago. Just the samples are so incredibly real. They are real. They're really good sounding. And I think that actually, using pads to trigger those drums would give it great feel if you've got great feel in your hands. All right. Dean Kerpane. Oh, there you are. You're here in the room. Yo, Dean. Okay. I am now going to answer your question from the other day. Did you ever work with Tom Dowd? Yes, I did. I'm surprised, as long as I've known you, that I haven't told you my Tom Dowd stories like 10 times. For those of you who don't know, Tom Dowd was one of the original legendary record producers that started probably in the late 50s, kind of hit his stride in the 60s, and definitely hit his stride in the 70s. Worked with Eric Clapton. I think he did Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. Aretha Franklin. I can't even think of all the people the guy worked for. Legendary producer. By the way, everybody needs to write this down. Grab a pencil now and write this down because you are going to love this film. It's called The Language of Music. You can probably find it online and stream it for free. Maybe you'll have to download it for $5. The Language of Music, the life story basically of Tom Dowd. And he sits at a recording console for much of it. So, and he actually plays a little bit of Layla, puts the multi-track on and brings up the faders. So remind me, I'm going to tell you my Layla story after this. So, legendary man that he is, got to make a couple notes here. I've worked, I don't know, probably several hundred hours in the studio with Tom Dowd. He was the most generous. He was wacky in a good way. I mean, he was genius. I mean, like, if there's such a thing as radiation coming off of somebody's head in every direction, that was Tom Dowd. A million ideas, all of them great. It was a very practical man, a very creative guy, very kind, very generous, loved life, loved studios, loved being in the room with musicians. And it's funny, his records never really had like a Tom Dowd trademark sound because his approach to making records was understanding what the artist brought to the record and helping them get out of their own way so that they could be truly themselves and then just make sure the performances were good. I think that any of my other studio friends who've worked with Tom would tell you that was his approach. Anyway. Okay, first story. It was the Eric Clapton record. No, it wasn't the Eric Clapton record. It was Eric Clapton found 2 guys. Eric had a house on Paradise Island in Nassau, Bahamas. And there were 2 guys named Tom and Don that camped out on the beach behind Eric's house. Now, Eric's house was up on a hill, and you go down the hill on one side, and there was a beach, and then you had a floating dock house or a boat house. It's like a 3-bedroom little apartment that floated, on a dock. If you walked down the path from the hill on the other side of the house, there was a beach house down there, because there was a beach on both sides, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so on the side, I think had the dock on it with the floating housey thing. There were 2 guys camped out there in a tent named Tom and Don. And I think that they knew that Eric lived in the house. And there was, no guard or anybody keeping people off the beach. It was public. And they would jam on literally on like bongo drums and an acoustic guitar. And Eric heard them and sat down with them and started jamming with them and really took a liking to them and jammed with them for several times, I think, for maybe hours at a time, just sitting on the beach. That's the kind of guy he is. So he eventually got them a record deal, at least a demo deal, if not a record deal, with RSO Records, which was Robert Stigwood's label. That's the label that the Bee Gees were on, I believe, and the label that Clapton was on around the time that he did, like, I Shot the Sheriff and that sort of stuff. So he brings them to Criteria. If I remember correctly, Carl Richardson was the engineer. I was second engineer. Somebody else worked on the project before I got involved, and then I was working on it. Anyway, so I think that was the first time that I ever worked with Eric Clapton. And after about 3 days, everybody went to lunch one day, and they all actually went to lunch. They left the studio, got in cars, and went to lunch somewhere. And Tom Dowd said to me, "Hey, you want to learn something really cool?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Hang out with me. While everybody else is eating, I'm going to show you this really cool trick." Okay. So we had a rough mix of a song. I can't remember the name. There was a song called Greyhound Bus on there, but I don't think that was the song. Anyway, the song had like a 4-count rolled turnaround that happened after the bridge going into the last chorus. It went boom. Maybe it's a 3-count. Whatever. 3 or 4 count. Anyway, and it really nailed it on the downbeat of the last roll and went into the last chorus. So Tom Dowd says to me, "Sit down at the 2-track machine and pull up that rough mix we did." Okay. And then he said, "I want you to take that turnaround and pull it out of where it is and pull it up to the front of the song. I want to bang into the song on that turnaround." And I went, "Okay." And now I remember the scene in the movie Airplane where the guy's sweating bullets and they're just like pouring water. Obviously they had little hoses on his head. Water's just running off his face. That's what I felt like. I was so nervous. I mean, here's what, at the time, it was safe to say Tommy Dowd was like one of the 5 top producers probably in the industry on a worldwide basis. And he's standing directly behind me. I could practically feel his breath on my neck. And he's saying, "Okay, edit." And so I've got my hands on these 2 10-inch metal reels, and I'm going, rocking them back and forth over the playhead like 100 times, looking for a place to make the first cut. And he goes, "Jesus Christ." I actually had another word in there after Jesus. And he said, "Would you just cut the tape already?" And I said, "Well, I'm nervous." And he said, "Just cut it. You can always put the damn thing back together." And I went, "Oh, he's right. So you really can't make a mistake cutting tape. You could make a bad edit, put it back together, but, Anyway, I thought that was brilliant advice. And honestly, if I can be a little bit immodest, I became a really good editor of both 24-track, 2-inch, and 1/4-inch. And it was all because of the confidence that I gained from Tommy Dowd giving me that tip on that day. One more Tommy Dowd story. Should I keep going on the Tommy Dowd riff? I can't tell if you guys are actually listening. Paul House says he loves the real world stories. Well, that's the only vote I need. I love Paul. All right, so it might have been the same. No, actually, you know what? The first time I worked on Clapton, it was uncredited. It was an album after 461 Ocean Boulevard called "There's One in Every Crowd." And I was like an incidental second engineer on that thing. I was like the assistant to the assistant engineer because I literally just started at the studio like a couple of weeks before, maybe. Anyway, again, Tommy liked cutting stuff with the full band in the studio. He did the Allman Brothers Eat a Peach at that studio. Could you imagine? Oh man, what I would give to be in that room. Anyway, so we got the full band going, like 6, 7 players, and everybody heads out for the night, probably like midnight 2 in the morning, something really late like that. And Tommy says to me, you want to learn how to get a great guitar sound, great acoustic guitar sound? I went, sure. Who wouldn't want that? He goes, all right, stay here with me. So it's just Tommy and myself alone in the studio. This gets slightly off color, but just ever so slightly. He says, okay, get down on your knees. I remember feeling like prickly face and thinking, oh my God, this isn't happening. And he looked at me, he saw the look on my face, he went, not for that, you idiot. Get down on your knees and move your ear around the acoustic guitar, and when it sounds good, stop and then put the microphone right there. I'm sure I've told you guys that story before. Anyway, that's the kind of guy he was. He was super generous, always teaching like the youngest guy in the room the best tricks. I will forever be in his debt, and he was always a gentleman to me. One more. I think it was literally my first day, if not one of my first days working at Criteria. In Studio C was like in a connected building, but you had to walk across a parking lot. You could either walk over like a bridge thing inside the building or walk across the parking lot. So somebody hands me a vacuum cleaner, one of those big industrial hoovers, and says, go over to Studio C and vacuum the lobby. And I get over there and I'm vacuuming, and I can see these two gentlemen. They're probably in their mid-50s. It was Arif Martin, who's another world-class producer, and Tom Dowd. And they were working, I want to say, on the Rod Stewart song, Do You Think I'm Sexy? Because I do kind of remember hearing da 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 coming through the back wall of the control room. It kind of became like a big speaker, if you will, sympathetic vibrations. You could hear it through the wall out in the lobby. So these guys are playing pinball. I remember it was a pinball machine about a fly fisherman, and it was called Nip It. I can't believe I remember that stuff. And so I could tell they were a little disturbed by the fact that I was vacuuming the carpet. I probably didn't have enough brains to think that I would disturb them. Maybe should have just waited till they were done with their game. Anyway, at some point, I tapped, I believe it's Tommy Dowd, on the shoulder, and I said, excuse me. And he kind of did one of these over the shoulder. I said, excuse me, can you tell me how to make a hit record? I think I said, I'm new here, like they couldn't have figured that out on their own. Can you tell me how to make a hit record? And they stopped the game, and it was a very competitive game. I'm sure high scoring for both of them. They stopped the game. He turns around, he looks at me, and he goes, on the other side of that wall, we've got the best studio money can buy, one of the greatest artists of all time, the best session players, the best gear, the best of everything. I don't know if we're making a hit record. But, and then he points out the window. There's a big picture window on the other side of the lobby. He points out the window. He said, see those warehouses down the road? Like a quarter of a mile away, there's a strip of warehouses. I said, yeah. He goes, somewhere in that warehouse is probably a kid with a TAC 4-track, and he's making a hit record. You want to know why? And I went, sure. He went, because he wrote a hit song. That's how you make hit records. There you go. My first day in the industry. I learned the good stuff. I got to say, I was extremely tickled when I was at Criteria a couple days before this past year's road rally. I got invited to go to a reunion and see a bunch of people I haven't seen in like 35, 40 years. It was one of the greatest moments of my life, seeing all of them again and sharing all these stories. We all had a Tommy Dowd story to share. And Dana Dowd, his daughter, was there, and she's handling his estate. And so I got to hang out with her a bit and tell her some of my stories, and she's taken notes because I think she's working on another documentary about her dad. Anyway, just I love, it was such a great time. And he was such a great man. All those guys were great. You're welcome, Dean. Glad to give you the stories, dude. I think I've got everything covered that was on this list of hangover questions from the other day. Oh, excuse me. I don't think I got to this one. This one was from Bonzo, who I haven't seen in the room yet today. But Bonzo asks, can I submit drones to multiple listings if the listings, plural, have some of the same refs? It's not uncommon for us to use the same refs. It's not like we use it once, then throw it away and never touch it again. So yeah, if we've got a lot of, like right now, we're probably running or about to run even more sci-fi sounding drones for the COVID shows that'll be coming up. And yeah, if we find drones that are just spectacularly good, or any examples of anything that really hit the nail on the head, we will use them over and over again. And we'll include some other stuff to give it a little variety. But yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to me that, if over a 30-day period now you see like Cliff Martinez drones or Trent Reznor drones show up being referenced in a lot of these listings. Not only can you submit the music to listings with the same refs, you can submit the music to as many of those listings as you want. People often ask us, do I have to wait until I hear back from a submission that I did on one listing to submit to another? And the answer is definitely not. I strongly encourage you to submit to as many listings as you feel are truly appropriate for what you've got, because you want to get a lot of irons in the fire. Some might say, oh, Michael's saying that because he wants to get all those big submission dollars in. Trust me when I tell you that there are times, years that we've lost money on submission dollars coming in versus what we pay the screeners. There are years that we make money. It's not a huge profit center for the company. I just look at it, it's a wash. So I just want you to get more deals so that we can brag about it. There you go. Let's see, any other questions? Oh, there's Bonzo. Hey, Bonzo, how are you? I'm glad you're here to hear the answer. John Pearson's weighing in, saying, "Very true, Michael." I'm guessing he means about what I just said about as many irons in the fire. All right, any other questions? I have a question above. All right, let me go up there. I moved my little scrolly pad, so I just reached for it. Question: did you and everyone else in those sessions know what you were working on was going to be as big as it all became? That's a great question. I mean, honestly, Eric Clapton had already been big, obviously, with Cream and as many other incarnations long before I ever worked with him. The question is, did he know that I would become the CEO of Taxi? Seriously, Clapton was big. By the time I worked with him, 461 Ocean Boulevard with I Shot the Sheriff and Motherless Children, all those great songs had come out probably a year before I worked with him. And he was just out there touring like crazy, and those records blew up. As a matter of fact, I used to sell ice cream sandwiches at concerts to make money before I got my job in the studio. And I remember selling ice cream sandwiches at a Clapton concert probably about 9 months before I ever worked with him. And he and I were in my car one day going to find the best chili dog in Miami, and I told him that story. And he just looked at me and said, "My, how far you've come." From selling ice cream sandwiches to working with the guy who's standing on the stage. Firefall is the only act I can think of that wasn't famous when the record was made. They were guys, from the Flying Burrito Brothers and JoJo Gunn and Spirit. So, some pretty famous bands that maybe weren't like huge, top 10 bands, but back in the days of FM radio, those were certainly well-known acts. And so they were unknown. As I mentioned the other day, nobody else on the staff at Criteria wanted to work with them because they weren't the Eagles, they weren't Clapton, they weren't the Bee Gees, they weren't Rod Stewart. We had all these big acts there all the time. Not most of the time or some of the time, but like 100% of the time. So it's kind of rare that a band came in that nobody really knew. That's how I ended up in that record. And I got to say, the first time they ran down the rhythm track of the song "You Are the Woman," and Ricky Roberts, I think, was standing in an airlock and sang a scratch vocal. Maybe he was in a vocal booth. I don't know. In any case, I remember, and the rule of thumb was assistants are to be seen and not heard. But I remember looking at Carl Richardson, who was the first engineer sitting at the console, and I just looked at him and I said, "That song's a hit." And he went, "Shh." We just talked about that last November. Matt Ballon wants to know, do I ever pitch any of my own music to the taxi listings? I don't make music. I just tell other people how to make theirs better. And how about the screeners? No, it's a great question. No, screeners are absolutely not allowed to pitch their music. As I mentioned before, one of my daughters is a solid singer-songwriter, and she has walked away from that career and chose something else. But before she did, I mean, she was starting to get some traction. She was starting to write with pro writers, and I didn't make any of those connections for her. She, as a matter of fact, changed her last name because she didn't want people to know she was my kid. She was embarrassed or just wanted to do it on her own. I'm not sure which. But she never asked, and if she had, she would not have been allowed to pitch her music through Taxi. I've had friends that have, many friends over the years that have joined Taxi. I never know what they submit to. I never know if they have submitted, if they're getting forwarded or returned. None of that stuff. Literally, you could turn over every rock for the 28 years we've been in business and not find one little impropriety like that, because I'm really proud of the company and I don't want somebody to ever go, look what you guys did. There's other stuff in my life I may not be proud of, but it has nothing to do with Taxi. Bonzo says the slapback delay in your house sounds great. That's because I live in a 10,000 square foot mansion, Bonzo. No, it's not. It's a typical suburban 4-bedroom house. Let's listen to the room. What'd you say? Like 65, 75 milliseconds? No, I didn't think that was a sneaky question, Matt. Bonzo liked my room sound. All right, here's a question from Dan Weber. Can we talk about vintage recordings again? Sure, what do you want to know? Thanks, Paul, for that comment about integrity. I appreciate it. Do you mean more studio stories or about vintage recordings that people can submit for today's market? Christopher Jones said he's reading. Oh, that's right, Christopher. Somebody on staff forwarded me your suggestion to do one of these hangouts about Lamont's book. I've already actually been in conversation. I know him well enough, and I've got his home number. I could call him at home, but he doesn't really want to be bothered with this stuff. His wife, Barbara, is more likely to like, oh, hi, Michael. How are you? Sure, honey, whatever you need. But their publicist and I, she sent me the copy of the book recently, and I said, Lamont has been our Lifetime Achievement Award winner at the Road Rally. It's a great guest. Before that, he was on a hit songwriting panel like 2 or 3 years before that. He's such a sweet, lovable guy. And just, man, if you think my stories are good, I'm nothing compared to that dude. And if anybody in the room, in the chat, doesn't know or watching this, Lamont Dozier, along with the Holland brothers, co-wrote probably 65% of all the Motown hits that you know by heart. Can you imagine? Just, and tells great stories. He's told great stories. The Road Rally, the book is incredible. Okay, so Dan Weber wants to know. Anyway, I've been in conversations with them. I was going to do a split screen remote with Lamont and have him join me for a Taxi TV. But we've been having problems with the split screen, and Lamont and his wife, Barbara, don't have like a techie that lives with them. They don't live in Los Angeles, otherwise I would just go to their house. So I think what I'm going to do is just interview him by phone, and I think that'll happen fairly soon. So the question Dan Weber wants to know, is vintage recordings, how does it work with libraries and television? There's a demand for authentic vintage stuff recorded back in the day. They're not looking for hits. They're looking for stuff that is good enough that sometimes you're watching a TV show and you go, oh, that song sounds like, was that a hit that I missed in the 70s? No, probably wasn't a hit that you missed in the 70s. It was somebody's demo that almost got them a record deal and didn't. And it's been sitting on a shelf now for 40 years. And they got it to a publisher who specializes in pitching vintage music for TV. And that particular publisher, probably, it's a safe bet that they get a big chunk, if not the majority of the music in that catalog has come through Taxi over many, many years. Our two companies love each other, and they're just great people to work with. So they run listings with us quite often, and it could be anything from they're looking for, big band stuff from the 40s to, Dylan-esque or Peter, Paul and Mary folky stuff from the 60s to classic rock from the mid-70s to whatever. And the funny thing is, I've known them for so long. Their cutoff date used to be like, nothing after 1975. And now I think they just ran a listing with us looking for stuff from the late 90s. So as we've gotten older and time has marched on, what is old to them is not that old to us anymore. Anyway, yeah, there is a market. Now, why does somebody want that rather than something that sounds really clean and well recorded, done in Pro Tools or Logic? And, it's because it doesn't sound authentic anymore. They would literally rather have stuff that was decently recorded on a TX 4-track. I mean, it just can't be like sloppy all over the place rhythm. The song's got to be reasonably good and being like, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and out form. It doesn't have to be that particular form. It's got to have some form. It can't just be like a run-on sentence that goes on for 5 minutes with a meandering melody. It's got to sound like a song. If it's got a hook, even better. If it's got a lyric that works in a scene, even better. But most of the time that music is going to be used as background source music or background period. The difference between background source music and background music is background source is ostensibly coming from a source. If you were a character in that scene, would you hear that music in the room you're standing in? Think about that for a sec. So you're at a bar, you hear music. That's background source because it's coming from a source, either from a band on stage in the bar or from a jukebox, or maybe they just have a PA system in the ceiling. If the scene is two people talking in a restaurant and you hear, cocktail jazz piano, that's background source music. It's either coming from the speakers in the ceiling or it's coming from a guy sitting at a piano bar 30 feet away. Now, if the music couldn't be heard by the actors, if it's just like underscore or something, so there's just not still air. That was a really sibilant S. It's not still air in the room when the actors are doing their lines. That's background music, because if you were the character in that scene, could you hear that music? No. That's just background. So there you go. I think that explains the whole vintage music thing. You've got to be really careful when you submit vintage that you don't have players. I mean, good chance that you didn't have anybody sign a work for hire and they played bass on that recording that you did in 1979, right? You got to be able to track them down. They make very few exceptions because they do not want to get busted for having music that they don't have, the full legal right to pitch and sign off on when somebody uses it in a film or a TV show. So basically, you have to be able to reach out to all your old bandmates or the players who played on it. You need to either own or control the copyright. Controlling the copyright means that you have the ability to pitch that music without somebody else going, well, hold on, I've got, 75% of that copyright and you don't have the right to pitch it. The reason you want to reach out to all the other band members before you send it to that, well, at the point where the catalog says we're interested, they're actually going to call you up or send you an email asking you these types of questions. And when they do, you can't lie about it. Not that I think you're a liar inherently, but people do. People try and BS their way through it because they so badly want to get their song in that catalog. These guys do their due diligence, and they're not going to take it if they find out that you've been less than honest about something. Are there rare exceptions where the person they're about to sign can't get a hold of an old band member? Yeah. If the thing was recorded in the 50s and everybody else in the band has sadly passed away, there's no way you can get a hold of them. They may ask you to reach out to any relatives, but the problem with that is, any of the descendants of the people that passed away, the minute they hear, hey, can you sign off on this thing because I want to pitch this music for TV shows and films, they're going to see dollar signs, and they're not going to be realistic dollar signs. They're going to see $100,000 checks in their mind's eye when they just don't know. You could get $27, in PRO money from a placement, or you could get $2,700 for a sync fee, or $27,000 for being in a commercial. But the relatives can be problematic. And let's say there aren't any relatives. You can't, with best efforts, track down anybody who contributed to that thing, but you are the sole songwriter. And yes, there were other players on it, but you can't track them down to get them to sign a work for hire. Sometimes the guys at this publishing company will still take that master and that song and sign it because they're fully aware of every effort that you made to get in touch with these people. And because of the circumstances of everybody else having passed away, there's just no way to track them down or find this information on rare occasions. And I underline and italicize and bold the word rare. They will take a piece of music under those circumstances, knowing that the odds of them getting sued down the road are pretty slim, and they're willing to take a chance. But again, that might be, 2 or 3 times out of 1,000 or something in a year that they would make those exceptions. But they really don't care about the recording quality being on par with today's broadcast quality. They wanted to, stuff that was recorded on 70s gear just sounds like the 70s. It does. You could get the same players on the same instruments playing the same song and do it in Pro Tools, on my laptop, and it would still sound way better than the stuff that was done in a place like Criteria in the 70s. But the room sound, the vibe, the sound of the electronics in the console, all that stuff, even if you went out and probably got that gear, there's just something that is so identifiable about an era. We had the owner of that company on stage with me about 5-6 years ago at the Road Rally, and we played some spectacularly good music that was made to sound retro. Unbelievably well executed. Frankly, it fooled me before the Road Rally. I heard it, went, oh yeah, that's old. I was so wrong. The guy from the publishing company heard it. He knew in less than 5 seconds that it wasn't old, just because of the sounds of the instruments. But fooled me, and I'm an engineer, so go figure. Any other questions? Wow, 4:49. CD Baby, CD Baby got sold. Disc Makers actually sold off the CD Baby side of the company. Disc Makers is still making CDs, to the best of my knowledge. Paul House has a question. Have you ever been to Abbey Road or Maida Vale? I worked one day at Maida Vale. Amazing place, and DJ'd at a party there. No, it is on my bucket list to go to Abbey Road. I've got an Abbey Road sweatshirt somebody brought me back. Many of my engineer buddies have worked there, and I have been to dinner with Jeff Emmerich. I called up Shirelli and invited him to go with us because I knew he would enjoy it every bit as much as I did. And gosh, we spent, 3 or 4 hours at dinner with Jeff Emmerich, who sadly passed away about a year ago. But so I know all the good stuff about Abbey Road. By the way, I know I talk about this all the time in the show. I hate to be repetitive, but there are always new people watching these. If you've never read Jeff Emmerich's book, it's called Here, There, and Everywhere. I forget the title now. I may be confusing that with somebody else's book. I think out of all the Beatle books, I think I've read every one of them that matters, certainly. It is the one that takes you most behind the scenes. And just being an engineer, it's easy for one engineer to tell when another engineer is telling the truth about stuff that happens in the studio. I felt that everything in that book was totally believable. And actually, it takes a little bit of shine off of George Martin's star. There are times when very important things happened, like maybe some stuff on Sgt. Pepper's where George Martin wasn't even in the room. Anyway, you learn a lot about the old school mindset, very like lab coat atmosphere around Abbey Road at the time. And guys literally wore like white lab coats, and you had to wear a skinny black tie to work. It looked more like NASA and was kind of run like NASA than, you know, the like pot smoking, LSD dropping studio that the Beatles turned it into. Justin Mather says, yep, it's called Here, There, and Everywhere. Buy that book. Easy read. I read it on a vacation once and just didn't want to put it down. I think I actually started it over when I got to the end because I had a few more vacation days left. Mix Magazine had a long article on the remastering of the last 3 Beatles albums. Great. Would love to read that. Uh, 4:52. I got a few more minutes here. Paul House says, yep, and only engineers were allowed to touch the gear. Boy, you know, and just, yeah, you know what? Even if that's all you read the book for, if you've ever touched a fader, that would be worth the price of the book. Just hearing all that behind the scenes stuff, how rigid they were. Yeah, I once actually, the first job I had in New York City after I left making records in South Florida, moved to New York and started doing audio post-production. I actually worked at a facility where the owner, and no, it wasn't Howie Schwartz, the owner's name was Irv, and that's all I'll say. When you felt like you were cutting quarter-inch tape, because it was a place where we did media recording stuff all the time, media mixing, recording, editing, all that crap. And if you felt that your razor blade was no longer sharp, which is pretty imperative when you're cutting tape, and you would take it to him and say, I need a new blade, he would literally hold it up to the light and look at the edge of the blade and go, nope, this one's still got some life left in it, and hand it back to you. I wanted to move back to South Florida so bad I almost cried the first time that happened to me. New documentary about the Beatles by Peter Jackson should be great. Yep, he's going to make them all 2.5 feet tall, living in little mud huts covered with grass. It's a new look at the Beatles. Excuse me, I just burped on camera. All right, Michael, could I talk a little bit more about cutting tape? When and how? Sure. This will be the last thing because we're almost at the end of the show. Thank you for putting up with my announcer voice. Cutting tape. Make sure your razor blade is demagnetized. You can take a whole box of them or a whole tray of them and demag them. What else can I tell you? Tom Dowd actually showed me not to use a grease pencil. We would take China markers and use that. You would rock, obviously, on an old analog tape machine. There was an erase head, a record head, and a playback head. Over here was the erase head. The record head was in the middle, and playback head was the last thing it touched before it went to the other reel. And so you would rock the tape and look for a kick drum or a snare drum or a hi-hat or a guitar chord, anything that was staccato enough. You know, we didn't have waveforms, we didn't have computers, and you would just rock the tape back and forth over the thing. I mean, sometimes I would cut words. I once inserted the letter T in the word heritage for a Ronald Reagan speech. He went, heritage, and there was no T. So I think myself and my assistant engineer just went, t, 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 tried a bunch of different T's and cut them out, laid them on a table one by one, cut them in until we got one. Everybody in the room went, yay, that's it. Ronald Reagan sounds like he said the whole word. So you just rock it back and forth, and then when you hear that you are right in front, I'm talking microscopically, you don't want to cut any of the beat or whatever that percussive thing is that you're editing. So you find it, and there's actually a line down the middle of the playback head that separates the plus side and the minus side, I think, of the coils that are contained within the head. Anyway, when that thing is lined up literally about 3 hairs width to the left of dead center on that head, you take the China marker and make a mark, take it out with your thumbs and index fingers, and lay it in the cutting block, and then hold on either side of the tape, like so, and then take the razor blade and go, and you couldn't be slow about it. You had like that, because again, as Tommy Dow taught me, you can always put that sucker back together. But yeah, it always tortured me watching new guys sit there going, like cutting it slow was going to stop them from making a mistake, and it wouldn't. They would just make the cut more of a sawtooth than a straight like razor cut. So that's it. And then you look for an identical thing to cut on later on. Let's say that you're going to take the first verse of a song and move that to the second verse, and take the second verse and move that up and make it the first verse, which Ralph Murphy and I believe Robin Frederick both say that the second verse is the one that should probably go first most of the time, but that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, so you look for the same thing. I think Tommy Dow was the one that told me it's the law of reciprocity. You got to have the same thing on both sides. If you try to cut, a kick drum to a snare drum, it's going to sound like a flam or something, If you try and cut in the middle of a cymbal, you can, or even in the middle of like, a very legato piece of an orchestra bowing, you can cut in the middle of that, but you better be damn good to do it. Because you have to kind of intuitively know when you listen to the first thing that you're going to cut from, kind of what the dynamic is, is there any grit in the bow? What's the velocity they're bowing at? How hard are they? All those things. And you can just kind of feel it and hear it and go, okay, so that was like, now I'm going up to the same place in the second verse, and I'm cutting right. It's rare that you would ever want to cut in the middle of something legato like that, but if you were, you just develop a feel. You make a few mistakes, you put stuff back together and go, oh, well, that didn't work out. But one day you hit on one that does work, that kind of edit, and you go, oh, so I actually did feel that right. And it's like, it's Zen-like. That's all I can tell you. 10,000 hours, baby. Got to do it over and over and over. Let's see. Did that answer the question, or did I go off on a weird tangent? We got 1 more minute before this big show ends. You're welcome, Justin. Ken, can you save that question for next week? Because I'm going to take tomorrow off from doing this show. I just don't want to wake up in the morning and then send out an email or something on social media saying show canceled. I'm just going to take the day off tomorrow, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. You guys are going to have to entertain yourselves in the middle of this horrible lockdown. Thank you, John Pearson. He says, great stuff, Michael. Thanks, and stay well. Congratulations again, man. I've been watching the success story thing on the forum, and thank you so much for always posting your stuff there. It's amazing how many people do not tell us about all the deals they get. It's because the first one is like First Kiss. Everyone after that, I think, unless it's like something really big and fantastic, they become numb to it. It becomes routine, and they don't bother to tell us anymore. But we love telling other people who have the same dream that you do and don't believe that this is real and it can work for them. So we'd like to tell them, look, here's a guy, John Pearson. He's had days where he doubted our abilities. He's had days where he felt like he was hitting writer's block. He had stuff go wrong for him, but he stuck with it. He hung in there. And now it's like, damn, all the time I see his stuff getting posted in success stories. So if there is any other, or if there are any other people that are watching this show, go to forums.taxi.com and look for success stories. And post your taxi success story in there. We want to know, did you get forwarded for a listing, end up signing a deal? Did you get forwarded for a listing, sign a deal, end up getting a placement? Did you meet a music supervisor at the road rally? Did you meet a publisher at the road rally? Did you meet a collaborator at the road rally? And that turned into a song which ended up getting placed in a movie. We want to know this stuff because we only hear about a tiny fraction of it. At the road rally, people walk up to me all day long and go, oh man, I meant to tell you about this deal. And I'm always running between the restroom and the ballroom stage or somewhere. And I say to them, I want to hear all about it. Could you please send me an email? Just send an email to any address you could find on the taxi website. Say, attention, Michael, it will get to me. And I get like 3 of those. I am not exaggerating to say I get like 50 to maybe even some years 100 people that during the course of those 4 days will tell me, I got a deal and I'm so grateful to you guys for what you do. And then they never follow up with the email. Lazy bastards they are. Lazy, lazy, lazy. All right, I am going to go be a lazy bastard. Thank you all for showing up today. I'm sorry I can't do a show tomorrow. Ariana, what are we doing on Mondays? Oh, I know. We're doing Monday's Taxi TV. We're doing something we haven't done in a while. I'm actually really excited about this. We are going to put you guys in the A&R hot seat. We are going to listen to somewhere around 6 things that got forwarded for an extremely high bar country listing. Doesn't get any harder than that. And 6 things that were not forwarded. And I told the ladies to pick the not forwarded stuff reasonably good. A lot of times we just pull it randomly. This time I wanted them to pull stuff that is like pretty darn good or not bad. So I want to challenge you guys a little bit to see how good you are at picking the stuff that the screeners pick to get forwarded. It's always fun when we do that stuff. And we're going to give away a copy of Robin Frederick's first book, Shortcuts to Hit Songwriting, to... I don't know who we give. I think we're doing it in the comments section after the show. I love when you guys leave comments. I really appreciate it. I look at them all the time. Occasionally I even go in and answer them. I tend to wake up pretty early in the morning. I got up at 5:17 this morning. Just woke up. I went to bed at 11, which is early for me. And when I do, that's the time when I'm like too stupid to do anything else, either very late at night or very early in the morning. And that's when I'll go look at the forum and read that stuff, or look at the comments under the shows. So thank you. I really appreciate, love hearing from you guys. And that's it. I will see you guys on Monday. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a great weekend, and see you on the next exciting episode of the Taxi Quarantini Happy Hour or Taxi TV on Mondays. Bye, you guys.